The sun was beginning to lower in the sky, painting soft orange shades across the small neighborhood where three boys walked home after a long afternoon of basketball. They were sweaty, tired, and laughing in the easy way only childhood friends can. The road they walked on was quiet, the kind of place where people kept to themselves but still knew one another by face. Houses were small, fences were old, everyone worked hard to make life continue the best they could. The boys didn't come from much, but they had good hearts. They shared their snacks, helped neighbors when asked, and always tried to do right even when nobody was watching. They didn't have expensive clothes or new shoes, but they had something stronger: respect for others, and a sense of responsibility their families taught them early. As they walked down the long stretch of road that led out of the neighborhood, they noticed a shiny car pulled to the side. It wasn't like any car they usually saw. This one looked expensive, spotless, and very out of place in the area. It sat unevenly near the curb, and a man stood beside it, staring at a flat tire like it had ruined his whole day. He looked older, maybe late 50s, dressed in a clean suit that didn't belong on that dusty road. He seemed frustrated, checking his watch over and over, then looking around as if hoping someone else would stop. Cars drove past him without slowing. Some people looked, but didn't bother to help. The boys watched him for a moment and then glanced at each other. They had grown up being taught that helping someone was the right thing, no matter who it was or what they looked like. Their feet slowed. The man looked tired, alone, and very unsure of what to do next. Finally, one of the boys took a small breath and said, "Let's help him." The others nodded without hesitation, and they walked toward the man. The moment the man saw them approaching, he stiffened a little. Not out of fear, more out of surprise. It was clear he didn't expect help from anyone, especially not from three teenagers walking home with worn-out sneakers and backpacks hanging off one shoulder. But the boys greeted him politely, keeping a respectful distance as one asked if he needed help with the tire. The man paused, his eyes softening, as if the question alone eased his frustration. Yes, he said, sounding unsure. "I don't really know how to change it. I've called someone, but they said they'd take more than an hour." The boys shared a small smile. Changing a tire was something they had seen done many times before. One of them often helped his father fix cars in their home garage. They didn't brag about this. They simply stepped forward and offered, "We can do it." "It won't take long," one said with a calm tone. The man blinked, surprised. "Really? You boys know how?" They nodded, and that simple trust allowed him to step aside. The boys worked like a quiet team. One loosened the lug nuts, while the other placed the jack in the right position, checking to make sure everything was steady. The third boy handed tools, kept track of the bolts, and made sure the man wasn't standing too close to the lifted car. The man watched them with growing amazement, not because they were doing something extraordinary, but because they were doing it so willingly, so naturally, and without asking for anything in return. He tried to help at one point, but the boys gently told him it was safer to let them handle it. He stepped back, awkward but grateful, wiping sweat from his forehead. He kept glancing at them like he was seeing something rare. Within minutes, the tire was changed. The boys lowered the car back onto the ground, tightened the bolts properly, and wiped their hands on their shirts without thinking twice. They stepped back and told the man it was done. The man stared at the car, then at them, as if he didn't know how to express what he was feeling. I don't know what to say," he finally said. "Thank you. Truly." He reached into his wallet, pulling out several large bills. It was probably more money than the boys had ever held at one time. But they didn't hesitate. They held up their hands and shook their heads. "No, sir," one said kindly. "We were just helping. You don't have to pay us." The man froze, shocked. "Please, at least take something." But the boys refused again, and their voices held no pride or show-off attitude. They genuinely didn't want the money. Helping someone was enough for them. The man closed his wallet slowly, still watching them. "You boys are very kind," he said, his voice softer now. "This world needs more people like you." The boys smiled awkwardly, shrugging like it was no big deal. They wished him a safe trip and started to walk away, heading toward home before the sun dropped completely behind the houses. The man sat in his car for a moment before starting it. He didn't drive off right away. Instead, he watched the three boys walking down the road, joking again, laughing lightly. Like they hadn't just helped a stranger in a moment of trouble. He felt something shift inside him. He had met thousands of people in his life, business leaders, politicians, celebrities, yet none of them had shown this level of genuine kindness without expecting something in return. He was a man used to negotiations, deals, and hidden motives. He wasn't used to acts of simple human goodness. As he finally drove off, he kept thinking about them. Their worn bags, their simple shoes, their kindness, their refusal to take money when they clearly could have used it. Something about that moment stayed with him long after. He was back inside his big, silent home. He found himself replaying the scene over and over during dinner, unable to shake the memory of three teenagers who helped him without judgment, hesitation, or expectation. It had been years since he had experienced anything like that. Maybe never. The boys, meanwhile, reached their neighborhood just as the sky turned a soft purple. They split off toward their homes, still talking about the funny look the man gave them when they refused the money. They laughed because they didn't understand why he was so shocked. To them, helping someone without asking for something back was just normal. That was how they were raised. Inside their homes, their evenings unfolded with the same familiar routines. One boy sat with his grandmother, helping her carry groceries inside. Another greeted his mother, who looked tired from long hours at work. The third washed his hands and joined his father in the small garage where old tools hung on the walls. Life continued as usual, without any sign that something unusual was about to happen. Their families didn't know about the stranger on the road yet. The boys didn't make a big story out of it. They just mentioned it casually, like it wasn't a remarkable thing at all. Their parents listened, nodded, and smiled with quiet pride, knowing they had raised children with good hearts. None of them imagined that the man the boys had helped was far more than he seemed. While the boys slept that night, dreaming simple dreams of school, sports, and better futures, the man was awake in his large home across town. He sat in his study, staring at his computer screen, looking up the neighborhood the boys had come from. He clicked through maps, news articles, and community reports. He wasn't doing it to judge them. He simply wanted to understand their world. As he read more, his expression softened. He learned about the challenges families faced there. He saw data about old buildings, underfunded schools, and limited job opportunities. He felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. The kindness he had received from those boys wasn't just a moment. It was a reminder of the kind of humanity he had forgotten existed. It's the kind that didn't come with a price tag or a contract. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, thinking deeply. The boys had changed a tire for a stranger, but without knowing it, they had also changed something inside him, and he wasn't going to forget it. He had the power to change their lives. And for the first time in many years, he felt inspired to do something meaningful, something that didn't involve profit or deals, something driven purely by gratitude. By the time he finally went to bed, he had already made a decision, one that would soon bring a mysterious black SUV deep into the boys' neighborhood, surprising everyone who lived there. But for now, the night was quiet and the boys slept peacefully. Unaware of how close their lives were to changing forever, morning came softly over the neighborhood, touching the rooftops with gentle light. The three boys woke up in their separate homes, starting another day that felt like all the others. None of them knew that the small act of kindness they had shown the day before was already moving through the thoughts of a man far richer and more powerful than anyone in their area had ever met. One boy woke up to the familiar sound of his grandmother humming in the kitchen. She hummed the same tune every morning, something old that carried warmth and calmness. He stretched his arms, blinked at the sunlight leaking through the curtains, and rolled out of bed. Their home was small and worn out in places, but it held love in every corner. His grandmother always said, "Love made a house feel bigger than it looked." He helped her fold clothes, sweep the floor, and wash dishes. It was their morning routine, done with quiet teamwork and steady hearts. Even while helping her, he thought about the man they'd helped on the road yesterday. At first it seemed like just another moment, nothing unusual. But something about the man's face when they refused the money stayed in his mind. He didn't understand why it affected him, but it had. Across the neighborhood, the second boy woke up to his mother gently tapping on his door. She worked long hours at a small store and barely had time for rest. Still, she always made sure he had a warm breakfast, even if she skipped her own. He washed his face, brushed his teeth, and sat at the little table where she placed a plate in front of him with a tired smile. He knew she struggled, even if she tried not to show it. Their bills piled up more often than not. Some days the lights flickered. Some days the fridge held more empty space than food. He wanted to help her more, but he was young, with only small ways to ease her burden: running errands, helping neighbors for a little cash, doing chores without being asked. He didn't think much about the man from yesterday, not at first. But when he remembered the fancy car and the man's grateful expression, something in him wondered who that stranger really was. The third boy woke up to the smell of oil and metal. From the garage beside his house, his father was already awake, leaning over an old engine with tools spread out on a wooden shelf. That garage wasn't big, but it was where his father worked, fixed old machines, and earned enough to keep their home running. Sometimes he went days without customers, but he never stopped trying. The boy walked in, greeting his father quietly before grabbing a rag to help wipe down parts. His father looked proud whenever he saw his son learning new things, especially things that could help him one day. And though the boy didn't say it out loud, he was proud of his father, too proud of how hard he worked, how honest he was, and how he never let life break him. While all three boys moved through their morning routines, none of them spoke of the man with the fancy car again. Life in their neighborhood didn't leave room to hold on to small moments for long. There were chores to finish, school to attend, and responsibilities waiting at every turn. But across town, inside a huge home with tall windows and polished floors, the man they had helped was already awake and deep in thought. He had slept poorly, not out of stress or discomfort, but because the boy's kindness kept replaying in his mind. He sat at his kitchen island with a cup of coffee, but he hardly drank it. He stared at the swirling steam, thinking about how easy it was for people with everything to forget the value of simple good deeds. He had built his life on business, decisions, and sharp thinking. People in his world never did anything for free. Every handshake carried expectation. Every favor had a price. But those boys had shifted something inside him. They had walked toward him without judgment or hesitation and helped him as if they had nothing else to worry about. He opened his laptop, not sure what exactly he was searching for. He typed in the name of the area he had been stranded near. His eyes ran over articles, community updates, and social reports. He saw pictures of old houses, cracked sidewalks, and crowded classrooms. He read about parents working multiple jobs, elderly people living alone, and kids who wanted more than what life gave them. He saw the truth of that neighborhood, the same truth the boys lived every day. He leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow breath. The boys reminded him of a younger version of himself, back before he became wealthy. Back when he lived in a small home with peeling paint and a mother who worked too many hours. He had forgotten parts of that life, buried under years of success and pressure. But the boys brought it back to him in a way that felt strangely healing. He closed his laptop and reached for his phone. He made a short call, but with instructions that surprised even the person on the other end. When he hung up, he felt lighter, as if he had taken the first step towards something meaningful, something that didn't involve stocks, contracts, or deals. Meanwhile, the boys headed to school. Walking together down the cracked sidewalks, they laughed, teased one another, tossed a basketball between them, and talked about nothing important. Just a normal morning, but as they walked, they didn't know that the man was planning something that would touch their families in ways they couldn't imagine. At school, classes moved slowly. Teachers explained lessons, students whispered, and the hours stretched like they always did. The boys sat through math, reading, and science, trying to focus even while their minds drifted now and then. They weren't thinking about the future or dreams or life-changing events. They were just waiting for lunch, waiting for the final bell, waiting for another day to end. During lunch, they sat together at the same table they always used. Many students had brand-name shoes and phones they couldn't afford, but the boys didn't let it bother them. They had learned early that comparing themselves to others only brought frustration. Instead, they talked about basketball practice, upcoming exams, and a funny story from a neighbor's kid. After school, they walked home again. The sun felt warm, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. Life seemed peaceful, even simple. They had no idea that something unusual was already moving toward them. Back in his home office, the man had arranged everything. He had spoken to a trusted group of people professionals who handled special tasks for him. He explained what he wanted, and though they were puzzled, they didn't question him. They simply prepared. They arranged transportation, gathered information, and made a plan to visit the neighborhood the next day. They knew the area well enough to know it wasn't a place people like them usually visited, but they also knew their employer was serious. He wasn't a man who spoke without purpose. He sat silently in his office afterward, staring at the city skyline through tall glass windows. He remembered the boys' faces clearly, their polite expressions, their focus as they changed the tire, their gentle refusal to take money. Something about them pulled at emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel for years. He wasn't thinking of charity. Charity felt distant, like giving from far away without knowing the real needs of the people. He wanted something different. He wanted to do something personal, something that would actually matter. The boys, unaware of any of this, returned home. The evening felt ordinary: kids playing outside, people returning from work, music from a neighbor's home spilling softly into the air. Another day in the same cycle of life. The boy who lived with his grandmother helped her tidy the living room and sort old papers she kept in a small wooden box. She told him stories from her younger days, laughing softly as she remembered the past. He listened, enjoying the warmth of her voice. The second boy helped his mother prepare dinner. She chopped vegetables while he stirred a pot on the stove. She asked about school, and he told her about his day. She nodded, smiling through her tiredness, proud of him, even when she had nothing left to give. The third boy returned to the garage with his father. They worked together on a rusty engine, tightening bolts, testing switches, and wiping grime from their hands. His father taught him things step by step, proud of every skill his son learned. The night passed slowly and quietly. Families settled into their routines, and aware that their world was on the edge of something unexpected. The man sat by his window, watching lights flicker across the city. He felt a strange excitement bubbling inside him, an excitement he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about the boys. He wondered what their lives were really like behind the moments he had seen. He wondered about their dreams, their challenges, their hopes. He wondered if anyone else saw their kindness the way he did. And most of all, he wondered how he could make sure the world didn't dull the goodness they had shown. He knew money alone wouldn't solve everything, but opportunity could, guidance could, support could, and he had the resources to offer all of that. As he finally prepared for bed, he made one more call, just a confirmation. After the call, he closed his eyes and whispered to himself that some things in life, the truly meaningful things, happened at the most unexpected times. The boys slept peacefully in their small homes, unaware of the black SUV that would soon turn into their street, surprising every neighbor who saw it. And so the night ended quietly, with 3 boys dreaming simple dreams and 1 man planning something that would change their lives forever. The next morning began like any other in the neighborhood. Birds called out from the trees, dogs barked in the distance, and people slowly stepped outside to start their day. Most homes were small, close together, and filled with families doing their best to hold life steady. Nobody expected anything unusual to happen. The boys especially woke up with no hint of how different this day would soon become. The boy who lived with his grandmother stretched as he got out of bed. The air was a little cool, and he rubbed his arms before heading to the kitchen. His grandmother stood at the stove, stirring something warm, her soft humming filling the room again. She smiled when she saw him enter, and he smiled back, feeling that familiar comfort he always felt around her. He sat at the small wooden table and waited for breakfast, thinking it was going to be just a regular day. Meanwhile, across the street, the second boy hurried to pull on his shoes while his mother tied her scarf. She had another long day at the store and needed to leave early. She stopped for a moment, touched his shoulder gently, and reminded him to be careful, to stay focused at school, and to come straight home after. He nodded, promising like he always did. Life wasn't easy for them, but they held on to each other tightly, sharing whatever strength they could. A few blocks away, the third boy stood in the driveway beside his father. They were checking a car engine before the day's work started. His father handed him a tool and showed him how to loosen a tight bolt. They both bent over the engine, working side by side like they always did. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and it kept them close. While the three boys went through their normal routines, a black SUV moved down the city streets. Its windows were dark, its surface clean enough to reflect the morning sun. Inside the vehicle sat two people who worked for the wealthy man the boys had helped. They weren't dressed like security guards or drivers. They looked more like people who handled important matters quietly. The kind of people who got things done without making a scene. One held a notepad with the boys' street written at the top. They didn't talk much during the drive. They simply followed the directions given to them, heading toward a part of town that most people in their world rarely visited. As the SUV got closer to the neighborhood, the roads grew narrower and the houses older. They passed cracked sidewalks, rusted mailboxes, and kids waiting for school buses. But they didn't show any discomfort. Their employer had made his instructions very clear. Back in the neighborhood, people were just stepping outside when the black SUV turned the corner. Conversations paused. A man sweeping his porch froze mid-stroke. A woman carrying groceries stopped walking. Children playing with a worn-out soccer ball stood still, staring. Nothing like this ever came into their streets. Not sleek cars with tinted windows that looked like they belonged to important people. The SUV moved slowly, almost like it was searching for something. Neighbors whispered among themselves, unsure whether to be worried or curious. They watched it pass house after house, the engine humming softly. Inside one home, the boy with his grandmother ate quietly when he heard the rumble of the vehicle outside. He looked out the window with mild interest, but didn't think much of it. Cars sometimes passed through on their way to somewhere else, though rarely ones that looked so expensive. In another home, the second boy slung his backpack over his shoulder just as he heard neighbors murmuring outside. He peered out the door and saw people staring at the SUV with confusion. His mother stood beside him for a moment, narrowing her eyes. She whispered that people with cars like that didn't usually come here, but she didn't want him to worry, so she kissed his forehead and sent him off to school. The third boy wiped his hands on a cloth. When he heard his father mutter something about unexpected visitors, they both stood at the edge of their driveway, watching the SUV creep down the road. His father told him to stay close, just in case. Not because he feared trouble, because unusual things always made him cautious. A moment later, the SUV slowed to a gentle stop directly in front of the street where the boys lived. Both doors opened and the two workers stepped out. They didn't look threatening. They wore calm expressions and simple clothing. One held a folder. The other scanned the area as if trying to match faces with descriptions. Neighbors leaned against fences, peered from porches, or peeked through curtains. You could feel the tension mixing with curiosity in the air. Nobody spoke loudly. Nobody moved in too close. People were protective of one another, especially when strangers arrived without warning. Then, one of the workers lifted a hand, lightly asking a man standing nearby, "Excuse me, sir. We're looking for 3 boys who live around here." Whispers rippled through the street. Everyone knew exactly which 3 boys were being mentioned. They were the kind who helped neighbors carry boxes, shoveled snow without asking for payment, and played basketball in the evenings with laughter that carried down the block. The man pointed toward the area where 2 of the boys lived. "They're probably getting ready for school," he said cautiously. "Why do you need them?" The worker didn't explain much. He simply thanked the man, then waited calmly. By now the boys had stepped outside their homes. drawn by the attention focused on the street. They walked slowly toward the SUV, unsure whether to be worried or nervous. Their families followed behind them, their expressions tight with questions. The worker holding the folder stepped forward. He looked at the three boys with a gentle smile. "Good morning," he said. "We worked for someone you helped yesterday." The boys exchanged confused glances. They had no idea who he was talking about at first. Then it hit them, the man with the fancy car and the flat tire. "You changed his tire," the worker continued. "He told us everything. And he wanted to show his appreciation in person, but he had an urgent meeting this morning. So he sent us here instead." The neighborhood murmured again. People seemed both relieved and puzzled. The boys swallowed nervously, not knowing what any of this meant. The worker opened the folder and looked at them again. "He was very moved by your kindness. It's not often people help a stranger without expecting anything. He wanted to express his gratitude in a meaningful way." The boys didn't know what to say. They shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to react to such serious attention. The second worker stepped forward, holding a small envelope. "This is for your families," he said softly. "It's nothing compared to what he wants to do, but it's a start." The boys' mothers and father hesitated to accept the envelope, unsure what it contained. One mother held it carefully, like it might crumble in her hands. The grandmother stared at it with wide eyes. When they opened it, their hands trembled. Inside were several documents and a letter written in clear handwriting. The letter explained that the wealthy man wanted to help the boys and their families, not with random money tossed into their hands, but with real support designed to change their futures. School scholarships, new supplies, medical checkups, and a few months of help with household needs. Nothing flashy, nothing showy. Just genuine support from someone whose life had once been much like theirs. The parents looked stunned. Some neighbors gasped quietly. The boys stared in disbelief, still unsure how any of this was real. The worker spoke again. "He said your kindness reminded him of his childhood. He asked that we make sure your families have what you need for a while, and he wants to meet all of you soon once he's free." The boy's father stepped forward carefully. "We didn't ask for anything," he said softly. "They were only helping." The worker nodded. "He knows. That's why he wants to help you now." It meant more to him than you can imagine. There was a long pause where the neighborhood fell silent. The boys shifted closer together, feeling the weight of the moment. Then, the worker gestured toward the SUV and opened the back door. Inside were several neatly packed boxes. School supplies, clothes in various sizes, healthy food items, books, tools for the father's garage. Simple things that could make a big difference in their daily lives. The boys' families stared in amazement, hardly believing that anyone, let alone a wealthy stranger, would do something like this for them. Neighbors stepped closer, offering kind words, patting the boys' shoulders, smiling in a mixture of pride and disbelief. No one in the neighborhood had ever seen anything like this, as the workers helped unload the boxes. The boys remained still for a moment, feeling overwhelmed and unsure. They didn't mind doing good things for others. They didn't think it would lead to anything like this. Their hearts were still pure, still humble, still steady. After the SUV was emptied, the workers handed one last sealed letter to the boys. "He wanted you three to have this," the man said. The boys opened it slowly. Inside was a simple message, nothing fancy, nothing dramatic. It read, "Thank you for reminding me of what kindness looks like. I haven't forgotten where I came from, and I won't forget you." The boys looked at one another, stunned. Their families stood behind them, teary-eyed, grateful. Unsure how to express everything they felt, the workers offered gentle smiles, then returned to the SUV. "He'll contact you soon," one said before closing the door. The SUV slowly pulled away from the neighborhood, leaving a street filled with people who felt like they had just witnessed something rare, something beautiful. The boys stood silently for a moment, holding the letter, trying to understand how helping someone change a tire had led to this. They didn't know what the future held. They didn't know what else the wealthy man planned, but they knew one thing. Clearly, their small act of kindness had opened a door none of them expected in life. As quiet as their neighborhood seemed that morning, was no longer going to be the same. The day moved slowly after the boys left the mansion. Even though the ride home had only taken a short time, their minds stayed full of the things they had seen. It felt almost unreal, like a dream they were still trying to understand. The big house, the long hallways, the pictures on the walls, the shiny floors, the people in suits. The stories the man had shared with them, everything replayed in their heads again and again. They didn't even talk much on the way back. They were too busy trying to hold on to the feeling of being somewhere so different from anything they had ever known. When the SUV pulled up in front of their homes, the neighbors stood outside again. People had questions after seeing the same black vehicle earlier that morning, and now it had returned. Some stared from their porches. Others pretended not to stare, but still watched from behind curtains. A few kids ran closer, whispering to each other, trying to guess what was going on. The boys stepped out slowly, still feeling that strange mix of excitement and nervousness. The men in the SUV gave them a polite nod before closing the doors and driving away, leaving a cloud of curiosity behind. The grandmother of the first boy was already waiting on her porch. Her arms were crossed, not in anger but in worry. She walked toward him as soon as he started up the steps. He knew she was going to ask questions before she even opened her mouth. She always worried when something unusual happened, especially when it involved people she didn't know. She reached out and held his face gently, as if checking that he was really okay. The boy smiled to reassure her, and she finally relaxed a little. He didn't explain everything at once. He just told her they had met someone important the day before when they helped him, and he wanted to talk to them again. She listened carefully, her eyes softening. She didn't fully understand yet, but she could tell the boy wasn't afraid. And that mattered to her the most. Across the street, the second boy's mother came rushing outside with her work apron still on. She had left the store early because a neighbor had called her, saying something big was happening at her house. When she saw her son step out of the large SUV, her heart jumped. She wasn't angry, but she was scared. She worked hard to keep life steady, and anything unexpected made her feel like the ground could shift beneath her. She pulled him into a tight hug before he could say anything. He laughed a little, trying to breathe, and she finally loosened her arms. He explained everything as simply as he could, telling her about the flat tire the day before, the man they helped, the visit, the invitation, the big house, and the food he ate that tasted too fancy to describe. She blinked several times as he talked. It all sounded unreal to her, like something from a story you only hear about other people. But she could tell he was telling the truth. His face gave it away, the surprise, the excitement, the confusion, the wonder. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to take it all in. The third boy arrived home to see his father standing outside with a tool in his hand, frozen halfway through fixing something on the porch. He stared at the SUV leaving, then at his son walking toward him. He didn't say a word at first. He just placed the tool down slowly and raised his eyebrows. The boy knew that look. It meant, start talking. So he did. He explained everything while his father listened closely, barely moving. When the boy finished, his father finally sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and shook his head. Not in anger, just in disbelief. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder and told him how proud he was that he had helped someone without expecting anything back. That alone made the boy smile. The boys gathered outside again after everyone had calmed down at home. They met near the fence between their houses, sitting on the ground, knees touching the dirt. As they always did when they wanted to talk about something big. They didn't even know where to begin. There were too many things to say. They passed stories back and forth, comparing details from the mansion and trying to remember every word the man had said to them. They laughed at the parts that had felt too fancy. They whispered about the things that had surprised them most. And they sat quietly when they remembered how kind he had been. But soon, their excitement began to mix with worry. The man had said he wanted to help them. He had spoken to their families. He had looked them in the eye and told them their kindness mattered. But they didn't know what that help was going to look like. They didn't know if it would change anything, or if it would change too much. They were just three boys trying to make sense of something far bigger than anything they had ever imagined. Later that evening, the neighborhood buzzed with talk. The The story of the black SUV spread from one porch to another. People guessed that maybe the boys were in trouble. Others guessed they were being rewarded for something. A few people simply shook their heads and said they had no idea what was going on. But deep down, everyone felt that something unusual was happening inside their homes. The boys tried to go about their usual routines, but nothing felt quite normal. The first boy helped his grandmother in the kitchen, carefully peeling vegetables while she stirred a pot. She kept glancing at him, not in suspicion, but in concern. She finally asked him whether he felt safe with everything happening. He nodded. He told her the man they helped wasn't someone to fear. He seemed good, honest, grateful. She didn't say much after that, but her shoulders relaxed a little, and she gave him a soft smile. The second boy sat with his mother at their small table, while she ate a quick dinner before going back to work. She told him she didn't want him going anywhere without telling her first. He agreed. She told him she didn't trust men in big cars who made big promises. He understood. But then she admitted that she believed him when he said the man had been kind. She wasn't angry, she was just scared of losing the little they had. He held her hand and told her they weren't losing anything. She squeezed his fingers gently. The third boy helped his father finish fixing the porch. They worked in silence for a while, the sound of their tools filling the air. Then his father asked him if he wanted things to change. The boy didn't know how to answer at first. He finally said he wanted life to be a little easier, not different. His father looked at him thoughtfully and nodded. He reminded him that good things could happen suddenly, just like bad things. But what mattered most was staying grounded. The boy promised he would. Night settled slowly over the neighborhood. Streetlights flickered on, dogs barked in the distance, and the air cooled. But the boys couldn't sleep easily. Their minds kept racing. They wondered what would happen next. Would the man return? Would he call them? Would he forget? Would life go back to normal? Or had everything already shifted? The next morning began quietly. The boys woke up earlier than usual, each of them feeling a little restless. They dressed quickly and stepped outside around the same time. They gathered in their usual spot and talked softly, almost like they were afraid to break the calm of the day. But then they heard it, the deep, smooth sound of an engine turning onto their street. Their hearts jumped. The neighbors peeked through blinds and curtains again. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered. The large black SUV rolled slowly down the narrow road, its windows shining in the morning sun. It drove straight toward the boys' houses and came to a quiet stop in front of them. The doors opened. The boys stood up slowly, their breath tight in their chests. Something big, something life-changing was about to happen. The SUV doors opened slowly, and the boys stood frozen as three people stepped out. One of them was the same man they had helped on the highway. He looked calm and warm, just like before, dressed simply, even though everything around him suggested he was someone important. The boys' families stepped out of their homes almost at the same time, unsure if they should come closer or stay back. The neighbors watched from porches and windows, whispering quietly. The man smiled as he approached the boys, his steps steady, his presence gentle rather than intimidating. He greeted their families politely before turning his attention to the boys. He thanked them again for helping him that day with the flat tire. He said it with the same sincerity he had shown before, as if their kindness had touched something deep inside him. He told them that sometimes the biggest moments come from the smallest actions. The boys listened closely, feeling a mix of nervousness and hope. They exchanged glances, wondering what he was going to say next. He then explained that after meeting them, he had spent a lot of time thinking about how much their simple act had meant to him. He talked about how many people in the world hurry past others without noticing their struggles. But these boys had seen someone in trouble and helped without expecting anything. He said that kind of heart was rare. Then he revealed why he had come back. He told them he wanted to help them in return, not with something small, but with something that could change their lives in a real and lasting way. The boys' families stiffened, unsure what that meant. People had made promises before, but promises didn't always turn into reality. The man seemed to sense their hesitation. So he looked each parent and guardian in the eye and reassured them that what he wanted to do came with no hidden cost. He wanted their children to have chances he never had when he was young. He invited everyone to sit outside, right there on the grass and porch steps. It felt strange to have someone so powerful sitting on the ground like everyone else, but he didn't seem bothered. He spoke openly, telling the boys about his own childhood, how he grew up in a place where opportunities were rare. He told them about the people who helped him when he was young, and how he carried those memories with him to this day. He said that sometimes all someone needed was a door that opened once in their life, a chance to see a path they never knew existed. Then, he finally explained what he wanted to offer. He said he had set up a program for students who came from communities. Like there's young people who had huge dreams but didn't always have the resources to reach them. He told the boys he wanted them to join that program. Not later. Not someday. Now, they would receive support with school, supplies, tutoring, mentoring, and a place to study after school. They would be surrounded by people who would guide them, teach them, and help them grow. He said they didn't have to decide right away, but he hoped they would consider it. The boys were so stunned they didn't speak. It felt unreal to hear someone talk about their futures like they were important, like they were worth investing in. They didn't know how to process it. They looked at their families, searching their faces for clues about what they should feel. Their families were just as shocked, but a quiet hope was blooming behind their eyes. The grandmother of the first boy cleared her throat softly. She asked the man if this opportunity came with expectations that her grandson would have to owe something back. The man shook his head. He said kindness should be met with kindness and not debt. He only wanted the boys to try their best and believe in themselves. The mother of the second boy wiped her eyes quietly. She wasn't crying in fear. She was crying because life had been hard for so long, and she wasn't used to people offering help without wanting something in return. She asked if her son would have to leave home or move away. The man reassured her that everything would happen right here in the city. He didn't want to break families apart. The father of the third boy stood tall and thanked the man for considering his son. He said that sometimes people made promises out of excitement but didn't follow through. The man nodded slowly and told him he understood that worry. So he gently placed a folder in the father's handpapers with official information. Contacts, signatures, everything needed to show that this was something real. The boys listened quietly, their hearts beating fast as the adults continued talking. They tried to picture what this new life might look like. They imagined themselves studying in places they had only seen in pictures. They imagined being around people who treated them like they mattered. It felt both exciting and scary. When the conversation finally slowed, the man turned back to the boys and asked them if they had any questions. The first boy asked if someone like him, who had never been top of his class, could really join a program like that. The man smiled and said the program wasn't looking for perfect students. It was looking for good hearts, hard workers, and kids who didn't give up. The second boy asked if they would still get to hang out with each other. The man laughed gently and said of course they would. They weren't being separated, they were being supported together. The third boy asked what would happen if they failed. The man's expression softened even more. He told him that everyone failed sometimes, including himself, but failure was part of learning. What mattered was that they kept trying, and they would never be alone after that. The boys' families stepped aside for a moment to talk privately. They discussed the risks, the benefits, the changes it might bring. They thought about the boys' futures and how hard life had been. And slowly, they reached the same conclusion. They returned to the man and told him they agreed. The boys' hearts exploded with excitement, but they also felt a deep sense of responsibility. They understood that this wasn't just a gift, it was a chance to shape their futures. The man smiled widely, genuinely happy. He said someone from his team would come tomorrow to walk them through everything. For the rest of the day, the boys couldn't stop talking. They sat on the curb, tossing small rocks and imagining what the next few weeks would look like. They wondered what classes they might take, what mentors they might meet, and what dreams they might chase. They tried to picture themselves years from now, older, wiser, succeeding in ways they never thought possible. That night, Each boy lay in bed awake for longer than usual. The first boy thought about how proud his grandmother looked. The second boy remembered his mother wiping her tears and smiling at the same time. The third boy replayed his father telling him that this opportunity was something he had to treat with care. A quiet feeling settled into their hearts, a mix of gratitude, determination, and hope. They didn't know exactly what the future would hold, but they knew one thing for certain. Their lives had shifted in a way they could never have imagined. The next morning, the sun rose over the neighborhood just like always. But this time, the boys woke up with something new inside them. Something strong. Something steady. Something bright. And it had all begun with a simple moment on a quiet road, a flat tire, and 3 boys who chose to stop and help. Sometimes, life changed in ways you never saw coming. And sometimes those changes started with a small act of kindness that grew into something far bigger than anyone expected.